Here we are with Ryan Smith, game director with Insomniac for the brand new Spider-Man game. What's going on, man? How's your day today?
Oh, it's fantastic. I love seeing everybody playing the game and the different reactions. It's just super exciting. That's what we work for, is just get the game out to people.
Absolutely. Look, man, you spent 10 years over at Insomniac. Give me a little insight into that journey and how that's been for you.
Oh, man. So I started as a programmer at Insomniac. I've worked on all sorts of tech at Insomniac. But the way that I moved into the game director roles, I actually came through the gameplay programming side. Now at Insomniac, gameplay programmers are really, really sensitive to player mechanics and stuff like that. And so that was a way, and enemy design as well. And so that was a way that I got into the game design aspect. For a little while, I was actually a manager of the gameplay programming and design departments. And then, of course, with Spider-Man, I was able to transition from there to the game director role, where I'm really just looking at the product, trying to make the best, in this case, Spider-Man experience that I can.
I had an opportunity to play the game for a few hours today, and I gotta say, it was pretty amazing. To me, I think this was our first Marvel Spider-Man game that Insomniac has worked on. Is that correct, or?
Oh yeah, for sure. It's definitely, and it's been a terrific opportunity working with Sony and Marvel on this title. Oh man, it's been great.
Were you a big Marvel fan growing up?
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking about it and sort of wondering, well, when did I first hear about Spider-Man, right? When was I first into Spider-Man? And I couldn't even remember, because it's just been part of the culture for so long, right? My aunt sent me a picture just recently. She was cleaning out her house and sent me some old pictures. And there I am, like 4 or 5 years old, maybe 6 years old, probably, and wearing a Spider-Man shirt. And it's like, it's just like, that's been just part of the whole story.
That's super amazing. All right, so tell us about this. Were there any setbacks or pitfalls developing this game that you kind of came across?
Man, everything is always an opportunity, I think, when you're a developer. We were very iterative, so we try different approaches. We set out a big goal. So like for Spider-Man, the first thing we started working on was swinging, right? We wanted to make sure that swinging worked great, that the webs attached to buildings, that was super key. We wanted to make sure that it felt like you were swinging. It never felt like flying. We wanted to feel that arc of the pendulum and really pull on you. And so we went through a lot of iterations on that, and just different ways that we could get that feel, and different ways that we could keep the players' momentum up.
I think that's one of the most unique things about a Spider-Man game. When I play that game, that unique feel of swinging. So I got to dig into that a little bit. When you're thinking through that and wanting to get that momentum down right for the game and that vibe and feel, what is that process, as a game director?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to, starting with the goals again. How do the web lines attach? What are our right metrics for the city, so that when you swing, you can find a line that can go to a building. Getting the physics of the pendulum and finding how to carry that momentum off the line so that you can spring. Finding the right places for the player to give input, right? So we wanted to make sure that you felt like a experienced Spider-Man from day one. You could start the game and swing pretty easily. But we also wanted to make sure there was depth for players who really spent time with the game. And so we found those little moves that you could add, flinging yourself around the side of a building, springing off of the lampposts, that you could then chain together to keep your momentum up on your own.
You definitely went to Stanford, didn't you?
That is true. It's a true fact.
This is a Stanford guy for sure. How long were you in development for this game?
Several years. So it's definitely been a great journey putting it all together.
What was your initial reaction when you found out that you were going to be working on this game with Sony and Marvel?
Yeah, I almost couldn't believe it, right? It's such a huge opportunity, such a huge fan base of people that love Spider-Man. And it was something that, of course, we could see opportunities to put our developer hat on, and how could we tell a great Spider-Man story? How could we make great Spider-Man mechanics that leverage all of the Insomniac strengths and bring it forward? And just what a great opportunity to bring that character to the PlayStation 4.
So let's dig into Insomniac, traits. Sunset Overdrive. How much did this influence the game? We felt like we felt it a little bit in here.
I'm sure you did. Yeah, definitely. Sunset Overdrive taught us so much about traversing an open world, a city, with responsive mechanics and different ways that the player would think about it. So that when we were thinking about how big does our city need to be, how does the player need to engage with it, we had something to work from in our heads. Of course, this game is bigger than Sunset Overdrive, so there's lots of new challenges, and it has a different feel, different pacing to it. But we definitely brought that all forward.
So we're talking about the city in New York. it's pretty realistic. What was the process to work through that to make sure that it's really the likeness is there?
First, we looked at the overall layout of the city. What is our playable map? Where are the sort of landmarks? I mean, they are literally landmarks that we have, both real landmarks and Marvel landmarks that are in the game. And we wanted to make sure they were in the sort of right relative position, so that if you knew where something was, you found it, and you knew where something else was, maybe you headed in that direction, and you would come across it if it was in the game. And so then we also went from sort of a designer gray box, which is just flat planes and gray repeating textures or whatever. Of course, the art team did a tremendous job of providing different character to all the districts and different art styles that you'll see, and populating the whole world both with the NPCs, the content you can play, and again the Marvel landmarks, the little small details that you'll notice when you actually play the game.
Yeah, I'm a guy of attention to detail, and I can appreciate that. And if you were going to put your finger on one particular thing, the Insomniac touch, where do you think you really hit the nail on the head in this game?
I always let's see. I always remember when we sort of made a leap forward with our gadgets. Everybody knows Insomniac for our crazy weapons sometimes, and so when we figured out how we were going to integrate those into our combat loop, when we had that weapon wheel pop up for the first time, and you had your whole palette of gadgets to select, that was an Insomniac moment for me. I was like, that's sort of like, it's an Insomniac game and I can see it now. And so that was, for me as a game director, really focused on some game mechanics. That was one of the key moments.
All right, so that's a great follow-up question. What particular mechanic do you love the most, or weapon?
Let's see. I don't know. I love a lot of our gadgets, actually. I think there's a couple different ones. The web bomb is actually super fun. It's super fun because it disables a group of guys, so that's great. But it also webs up a whole bunch of dudes, and you can get an upgrade that lets you twirl them around and throw them against the wall. And so chaining it together in those ways, one of the reasons I love the web bomb.
Yeah, I think I just got the web spin them around mechanic. I don't have the bomb quite yet, but what I did get was some new suits. So let's talk about that. How did you decide on which suits to roll out, and any in particular?
Sure. I mean, I think multiple different factors go in there. We have suits that are inspired from the comics. We have suits that are brand new. And so we just wanted to have a good selection of interesting suits, and well as ones that would make sense with our story.
Okay, so the story. Why this particular time period in Peter's life? It looks like he's just right out of college, why not high school?
Yeah. Well, I think it gave us an opportunity to tell a unique Peter Parker Spider-Man story. So it was something where we could tell a new story. I think it's also something that people, are maybe going to recognize. They're going to understand that feel of just being out of college, of starting to think about, what is it like to be, take that next step in your life. And you can see that sort of reflected in the game. And so you'll think about that.
Why was this the ideal lineup for Sinister Six?
Let's see. I think all of them have a different a challenge in the gameplay, so there's something we could work with there. And I think one of the neat things is we've introduced Mr. Negative, and he's not typically traditionally in the Sinister Six, so it's somewhere where we could work with that. Again, staying true to the idea, but mixing it up.
How'd you decide on all these villains?
It was definitely a process, working with Marvel, working with our character and the story team in terms of, again, what was going to work in the story, what would make sense, getting some classic Spider-Man villains in there so that you'd have a touchstone as a player to people you wanted to see and fight against. They were in the game, as well as making sure that it made sense that we could tell the Peter Parker backstory, the Spider-Man backstory of 8 years where he could have engaged with these villains, put them away in Raft, which of course at E3 we had the Raft breakout.
Not only did you do an incredible job incorporating villains, but I think you did a really unique thing with incorporating Mary Jane. So how was that, and bringing her in the storyline and looping her in, but not just on a storyline level, but also with gameplay and affecting the mechanics? How was that?
Well, I think it was a great opportunity for us to tell the Peter Parker, the human story, right? And having playable Peter, and playable MJ is a great way to do that. It's also, again, staying true to MJ's character, but finding a role for her that was strong, that had a full character arc. That's something we work with Marvel on all our characters, to have a really strong arc for them, and being able to translate that into gameplay. So she's she's an investigative reporter, and so that's something that you can do that's active in the game. And as it goes along, you play as MJ multiple times, and you'll see sort of an evolution in the game mechanics that she has access to.
I got a nice go with her today in the museum and into some of the gameplay, and that was pretty awesome. But I also noticed in the pause menu that there's a bunch of content left for me to unlock and a lot to do there. What's the mindset around kind of the exploratory process throughout the game?
Well, I mean, we wanted to make sure that we had a real open world experience. One of the things we sort of our touchstone was cinematic action in an open world. And so we want to have this great through line for the story, and then make sure that our open world felt like New York City, felt like somewhere that you had a lot of stuff that you could do, and also reflect the storyline in that content, right? As the story progresses, your options and content that's in the city, the way the city looks and feels, changes. And so that was really important for us.
Can we expect a lot new DLC and new updates and content to continue rolling out with the game?
So we do have a plan called The City That Never Sleeps, and so that's where we're going to have some episodic content. First one's going to feature Black Cat, and that's going to come out, after we're focused on finishing the game right now, and so then we'll move on to that and more details later.
That's incredible. I won't pry on that particular piece. But one of the things that jumped out to me, in addition to the credible gameplay, was that when I was running my missions and I was going through the process and flying through the city, new missions would pop up, and I was super curious to figure out what's the storyboard process in that in development of figuring out that there's a proper flow, when to incorporate these side missions and these other opportunities to alert you in game. What's that development phase?
Yeah, there's so many different angles on that. We will use different whiteboarding techniques where we have even like Post-it notes or index cards where we move the missions around. We of course have that in digital form, so you can see the flow and the connection, the unlock. The animators will actually do storyboards, of course, of mission flow, so that we can see. We tend to do that, in some of our like 3D tools. And then, just iterating, we play test and we play it and we experience it ourselves. And then working with, again, Marvel on the story arcs that we're trying to tell and how they weave together and how that comes across in the game.
Well, since you brought up Marvel, Ryan, can we expect any other Marvel games and titles for Insomniac to work on?
Well, right now we're obviously focused on finishing Spider-Man, and we have totally enjoying working with Marvel, and but we want to keep the focus on Spider-Man.
Thanks so much for your time today, Ryan Smith, game director. Thank you. And now you got to do the pose for our thumbnail.